Most weed gets its name from how it smells, makes you feel, or some random inside joke between growers. But every once in a while, there's a strain that comes along that's so beautiful that it does something different. It doesn't make you think about the taste or the high first. It makes you feel something the second you lay eyes on it. Envy. The bud is so gorgeous that rival growers looked at it and turned green. And that's not just me being poetic. That's literally the reason for the name. Berner, the man who helped launch it, once said it smelled like gelato times 100, and that he called it jealousy because he knew people were going to be jealous when they saw that phenotype, for sure. This is the story of jealousy, the cannabis strain that was named after the exact feeling it gave everyone who saw it. So, to understand jealousy, you have to understand the man who made it, because this isn't some mystery strain with unknown origins. This one has a clear creator, and he's one of the most important breeders alive today. His name is Anthony Hart, but in the cannabis world, everybody calls him JBeezy, and he's the founder of a genetics company called Seed Junky Genetics. And that name actually tells you everything about him. Back in the old days, before any of this was legal, a seed junkie was slang for a grower who blew all their time and all their money obsessively chasing seeds and hunting for that one magic plant. And JBeezy was exactly that guy. He started out around 2007 in a Southern California garage on the old online grower forums, popping hundreds and eventually thousands of seeds for every single project, then carefully selecting the best ones, testing them, and doing it all over again. That process is called pheno hunting, and JBeezy became a master at it. And his track record speaks for itself, because if you've watched any of our other videos, you already know his work. Seed Junky is the house behind wedding cake, behind ice cream cake, behind Kush Minntz and LA Kush cake. This guy basically built a huge chunk of the modern dessert strain era. By the early 2020s, Seed Junky had grown into a roughly 100-person operation spread across multiple states, headquartered in a building up in Northridge, California, in the San Fernando Valley, that supposedly used to be an old rocket factory. And JBeezy ran it like a science lab, with entire rooms dedicated just to housing his plant library, and a borderline obsessive habit of lab testing every single cut for THC and terpenes. He once said nobody else was spending $100,000 on labs just to know what was in their seeds the way he was. He even told his labs that if they ever lied to him about the numbers, he'd fire them on the spot. But jealousy isn't just a seed junkie story. It's also a cookies story. Because around 2017, at a cannabis festival out in Victorville, California, JBeezy linked up with Berner, the rapper and entrepreneur behind the Cookies empire, and immediately hit it off, which led to Berner becoming a huge fan of JBeezy's work, even calling him one of the most prolific breeders he'd ever met, saying it was almost impossible to keep up because the guy came through with brand new strains every couple of weeks. And out of that relationship they built that day, the two camps created a collaboration brand called the Minntz, which was a joint venture between Cookies and Seed Junky. And this was a big deal, because the Minntz was the first time Seed Junky's genetics got sold straight to customers as finished flower and pre-rolls, instead of just seeds. And one of the very first flavors they led with was jealousy. So let's get into the genetics, because this is where you really see the pedigree. Jealousy is a cross of two strains, Sherb BX1 and Gelato 41. Now the Sherb BX1 was JBeezy's own creation. He took Sunset Sherbert and refined it, breeding it with itself and with animal cookies to lock in the traits he wanted. That BX in the name actually stands for backcross, which is a breeding technique to strengthen and stabilize a specific lineage. essentially taking the best traits from a parent plant and doubling down on them across generations. Then, in 2018, he crossed that with Gelato 41. But here's the key detail, and it's the kind of thing connoisseurs obsess over. He didn't use just any random Gelato 41. Most of the so-called Gelato 41 floating around out there is fake or unverified, because it was never really released in true seed or clone form. JBeezy used the real, authenticated cut, sourced directly from Cookie's main breeder, a guy known as Giga, also called Jai. In JBeezy's own words, it was the legit one, straight from Jai, and so was the Sherb. He knew, beyond a doubt, that both parents were the real deal. And when you trace those parents back, you realize jealousy is basically cannabis royalty, the great-grandchild of one of the most important families in all of weed. And Gelato 41 was created by the breeder Mr. Sherbinski by crossing Sunset Sherbert with Thin Mint Girl Scout cookies. And Sunset Sherbert, the other side of the family, was also a Sherbinski creation, made from Girl Scout cookies crossed with a strain called Pink Panties. So both of Jealousy's parents loop right back to GSC, Girl Scout cookies, the legendary strain built from OG Kush crossed with Durban Poison. So if you follow the whole chain, you go from OG Kush and Durban Poison to GSC, to Sunset Sherbert, to Gelato, and finally, to Jealousy. Leafly summed it up perfectly by basically calling Jealousy refined gelato, gelato concentrated and perfected. Now, I want to be honest with you here, because there's some confusion out there. The well-documented lineage, straight from the breeder himself, is Sherb BX1 crossed with that legit Gelato 41. But you'll run into some sketchier sources online claiming it's wedding cake crossed with Gelato 33, or pink panties crossed with rainbow sherbet. Those are almost certainly either flat-out errors or descriptions of fake cuts. The Seed Junky version is the real sourced story. So let's talk about that name, Jealousy, because it pays off the whole title of this video. It actually works on two levels. The first is subtle. Listen to the word. Jealousy. There's a gel sound right at the front, a little phonetic nod to its gelato parent. But the second reason is the famous one, and it's straight from the source. When JBeezy first brought the finished strain to Berner reportedly took one whiff and said, "It smells like gelato times 100. And when it came time to name it, Berner explained it plainly. He said he called it Jealousy because he knew people were going to be jealous when they saw that phenotype, for sure. That was it. The strain was named for the reaction he knew it would cause. A bud so frosty, so deep purple, so flat-out beautiful that other growers and smokers would be eaten alive with envy just looking at it. And honestly, it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the strain got so famous and so beautiful that it spawned a wave of counterfeits and rip-offs, people trying to cash in on the name. One Leafly reviewer even joked that with how good it was, they should have called it World Peace instead of Jealousy. And its rise to fame was absolutely explosive. Jealousy debuted in California dispensaries in late 2019, right in the early years of California's regulated adult-use cannabis market. And by the next year, demand was so insane that Cookies could barely keep up. The numbers are wild. From 2021 to 2022, Jealousy went from being in about 90 stores listed on Leafly to over 1,500. It cracked the top 100 out of Leafly's more than 6,000 cataloged strains in just a couple of years. And the hype turned into real-world chaos. Seed packs of Jealousy sold out at $750. Authentic clones, actual cuttings propagated directly from the mother plant, sold for $500 each, with hundreds of people literally lining up and waiting for hours in dispensary parking lots just to get one. This wasn't just a popular strain. It was a full-blown phenomenon. And it all came to a head at the end of 2022, when Leafly, one of the biggest cannabis platforms in the world, named Jealousy its Strain of the Year. And that award is a genuinely big deal, because Leafly says it can't be bought by advertisers. It's based purely on real data, things like how many people are viewing the strain, how many menus it's on, and how many orders it's getting. The Leafly editor pointed out that purple weed was extremely on trend at the time, and that Jealousy's flower ran dark purple all the way to nearly black, with little dapples of bright green poking through. And get this, Jealousy joined an absolutely stacked lineage of Strain of the Year winners that are almost all part of that same Cookies family tree. Gelato won in 2018, Wedding Cake in 2019, Runts in 2020, Do-si-dos in 2021, and then Jealousy in 2022. It was basically a dynasty. So what is it actually like? Jealousy is usually called a balanced hybrid, right around 50-50, sometimes leaning a little to the indica side. And it is potent. The THC commonly tests in the mid to high 20s, and some batches have been tested at nearly 30%, which is right up against the ceiling for flower. The dominant terpene is caryophyllene, which brings that gassy, peppery kick, backed up by limonene for citrus, myrcene for that dank earthiness, and touches of linalool and humulene. These terpenes don't just add flavor. Researchers believe they work together with THC and other cannabinoids in what's called the entourage effect, where the full chemical profile of the plant shapes the experience in ways that THC alone can't explain. And the total terpene content is loud, several times higher than your average flower, which is exactly why it falls into that exotic, top-tier category. The flavor is that gelato times 100 promise delivered, sweet, creamy, fruity, berry, with notes of plum, and even a fruity cereal kind of vibe, all sitting on top of those gassy, peppery diesel undertones. But the real magic, again, is the look. Big, dense, bulbous buds that run from deep purple to almost black, lit up with bright orange hairs, and absolutely caked in a thick frost of trichomes. Those tiny crystalline resin glands that coat the surface of the flower and pack in all the cannabinoids and terpenes. It is, simply put, one of the most photogenic strains ever grown, which made it an absolute superstar in the Instagram era. And the high matches the hype, a euphoric, giggly, time-slowing experience that relaxes your mind while keeping a little physical energy, balanced and strong all at once. But the influence of Jealousy goes way beyond just being a beautiful, popular strain, because JBeezy treats his best strains as building blocks. He has got a whole philosophy about already having the daughters and the granddaughters ready to go. And Jealousy became one of the most important parents of the modern era. The biggest example is a strain called Permanent Marker, which has Jealousy in its lineage, and which went on to win Leafly's Strain of the Year the very next year, in 2023. That gave Seed Junky back-to-back Strain of the Year wins, an incredible achievement. Jealousy also gave us strains like Purple Octane, and a strain called The Glove, which is Gary Payton crossed with Jealousy. Its DNA is now woven all through the cutting edge of the cannabis market. And the counterfeiting thing I mentioned earlier actually became a defining part of its story, almost a backwards compliment. The strain got so famous that fakes flooded the market, to the point where JBeezy himself bluntly said that 90% of the stuff out there labeled Jealousy is not actually it. Other growers explained that this is just what happens when something gets that famous. Everybody wants to slap the name on their product. Berner, for his part, basically called the imitation a form of flattery. Now, I'd be leaving out a big part of the story if I didn't mention how the business behind all this fell apart, because it got messy. The partnership between Seed Junky and Cookies, the Minntz, eventually soured badly. In July of 2023, Seed Junky's parent company filed a lawsuit against Cookies, against Berner, and against several of their executives, alleging things like breach of contract, fraud, and even claiming that Cookies had stolen the Minntz's proprietary genetics, mislabeled them, and sold them as their own. Now, I want to be fair and clear here. Those were allegations made in a lawsuit, not proven facts. JBeezy posted online that he and his partner had been sold a dream that never materialized, and that accountability needed to happen. Burner fired right back in a video, calling the lawsuit completely false and going off on JBeezy pretty hard. The final outcome of that specific case was never really reported publicly. No clear verdict or settlement made the news. But here's an interesting clue about how it all shook out. By 2026, JBeezy announced he was relaunching the entire Minntz brand independently as a fully Seed Junky controlled line with a new partner. So the fact that he ended up controlling the very brand at the center of the fight strongly suggests the two sides went their separate ways and he got the rights back, even though that's an educated guess and not an officially reported result. So that's the story of jealousy. A cannabis strain bred by an obsessive genius in a converted rocket factory, descended from cannabis royalty going all the way back to OG Kush and Girl Scout cookies, named after the pure envy it inspired in everyone who laid eyes on it. A strain so beautiful and so hyped that people waited in lines for hours and paid $500 for a single clone, that won Strain of the Year, spawned a dynasty of descendants, got faked by 90% of the market, and even ended up at the center of a massive industry lawsuit. It's the perfect symbol of the modern exotic era, the moment cannabis became as much about beauty and bag appeal as it was about anything else. Turns out they named it exactly right.